The Galactic Council, the powerful organization that ruled the universe, had been in control for centuries. They controlled countless planets, held sway over powerful species, and were feared by everyone. No one dared to challenge them, for they believed they were invincible. To them, Earth was nothing more than a forgotten, insignificant world, a tiny speck in the vast expanse of the galaxy. They had always underestimated Earth, and that mistake would soon cost them everything. On Earth, life went on as usual. People went to work, went to school, and lived their lives, unaware of the dark storm that was brewing behind the scenes. But in the hidden corners of Earth, deep within secret underground bases and silent military facilities, the quiet hum of activity told a different story. Earth's leaders had known for a long time that their world was in danger. They knew the Galactic Council saw them as weak and unimportant, but they also knew something that the Council didn't. Earth was anything but weak. For years, Earth's most brilliant minds have been working in secret, developing technology the Council would never believe was possible. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers from all over the world had come together, pooling their knowledge and resources to create something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. They had created a weapon, one that could rival the greatest powers of the Galactic Council. But this weapon wasn't just about technology. It was about the heart and soul of humanity. It was about the raw, unyielding determination of a planet that had been pushed to the edge. No one knew about this weapon, not the average citizens, not the world leaders, and certainly not the Galactic Council. Earth had kept it a secret, hidden away, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Council had no idea what was coming, and that ignorance would be their downfall. At first, the weapon was nothing more than a concept, a dream. But slowly it began to take shape. The Earth's greatest minds worked tirelessly, day and night, to turn that dream into a reality. They didn't have the resources of the Galactic Council. They didn't have the vast fleets or armies that the Council controlled. What they did have, however, was something far more dangerous: a deep desire to survive, a burning need to protect their planet from the galactic powers that wanted to control it. The weapon they were creating wasn't just an ordinary piece of technology. It was something far more complex. It was a weapon that tapped into ancient forces, forces that had been forgotten by most of the galaxy, forces that the Galactic Council had never even considered. Earth's scientists had uncovered secrets buried deep in the planet's history, secrets that could give humanity an advantage like no other. These secrets had been hidden for thousands of years, but now Earth had unlocked them. And with that power, they would not just defend themselves. They would strike back. But how would the Galactic Council react? Would they even notice? The Council had always looked down on Earth, dismissing it as a primitive planet. They thought humanity was just a bunch of weak, divided creatures, incapable of posing any real threat. They didn't understand the strength that lay within Earth. They didn't know what humans were capable of when pushed to the brink. As the weapon neared completion, something else began to happen. A strange signal, unlike anything Earth had ever sent out before, was detected by the Galactic Council. At first, they thought it was just another malfunction in their vast communication network. But when the signal repeated, they began to wonder, was it a warning? Or was it something more? The Council tried to trace the source, but it led them to Earth. They scoffed at the idea. Surely it was a mistake. Earth, a planet they had dismissed for so long, could not possibly be sending out such a signal. It must be some kind of fluke. The signal wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. It was the first sign that Earth was no longer the helpless, ignored world that the Council thought it was. Earth had a plan that would shake the foundations of the Galactic Council's power. The signal wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning. Earth was ready, and the Council had no idea what was about to hit them. As the Council continued to dismiss the signal as irrelevant, Earth scientists and military leaders quietly prepared for what was to come. They knew the stakes. They knew that if they didn't act now, the Council would crush them underfoot. But they also knew that this was their moment. The weapon was ready, and the time for secrets was over. Earth's hidden threat was about to be unleashed, and the Galactic Council's delusions would soon be shattered. Earth had always been underestimated. Even as the Galactic Council expanded its power across the stars, they never truly considered the potential of humanity. The Council had focused on their advanced technology, their enormous fleets, and their ability to manipulate the galaxy's most powerful species. They believed that Earth, with its small population and limited resources, could never pose a real threat to their dominance. But what the Council didn't know was that Earth had something far more valuable than advanced weapons or vast fleets. They had the power of unity and the ability to innovate in ways no one else could. Behind the scenes, Earth's greatest minds had been working together in secrecy, pooling their knowledge, skills, and technologies to create something that would challenge the very foundations of the Galactic Council. They weren't just building a weapon, they were creating a force that could rival the mightiest empires in the galaxy. This was no ordinary military project. It was the culmination of decades of research, experimentation, and deep collaboration across every corner of Earth. A team of the world's top scientists, engineers, and strategists had come together for one purpose: to ensure humanity's survival and to show the galaxy that Earth would no longer be ignored. At the heart of this project was an idea that went beyond simply developing better technology. Earth's scientists had uncovered ancient knowledge, hidden away in the deepest archives, left by a long-lost civilization. This knowledge was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't just about improving weapons or defense systems. It was about understanding the fundamental forces of the universe itself. Earth had unlocked a secret that the Galactic Council would never have imagined. They had discovered a way to harness energy and power that could reshape the very fabric of reality. The scientists working on this project were not just looking for an edge. They were looking for something that could change everything. This was a weapon not of destruction, but of transformation. It had the ability to disrupt the very systems that held the galaxy's most powerful civilizations in place. It could undermine the Galactic Council's dominance in ways they wouldn't be able to counter. The Council had relied on their technological superiority, but what they didn't understand was that Earth's weapon wasn't just about raw firepower. It was about turning their own arrogance against them. As the team worked around the clock, they faced numerous challenges. They didn't have the resources the Galactic Council had at their disposal, and they didn't have the years of experience in large-scale military operations. But what Earth had was determination. They had a burning desire to prove that they were more than just a forgotten planet. Earth's people had always been resilient, surviving against the odds throughout their history. This project was just another chapter in their long story of overcoming adversity. The weapon began to take shape slowly at first. It started as a series of small experiments, testing new materials and energy sources that had never been considered before. As the team made progress, they realized they were creating something truly groundbreaking. This weapon would not only be able to disable the most advanced technologies in the galaxy, but it would also create a wave of interference that could prevent the Council's vast fleets from functioning properly. It was a weapon that didn't just destroy. It altered the very systems that made the Galactic Council so powerful. But the secrecy surrounding the project was essential. The Galactic Council had spies and informants spread across the galaxy, and if they caught wind of what was happening on Earth, they would stop at nothing to destroy it. Earth's leaders knew that any hint of this project getting out could mean the end of everything. So the project was kept under the strictest secrecy, hidden deep beneath the surface of Earth's most secure facilities. Even the people of Earth, the very citizens who would one day benefit from this weapon, had no idea what was being done in their name. As the weapon neared completion, the team began to realize the scope of what they had created. It wasn't just about creating a tool for defense. It was a message. Earth was no longer a world to be dismissed. It was a planet that had learned from its mistakes, a planet that had refused to stay down. The Galactic Council had made the fatal error of underestimating the people of Earth, and they would soon learn just how costly that mistake would be. The final tests were carried out in secret, far from prying eyes. The weapon was activated, its energy surging through the systems, and the team watched in awe as it reached its full potential. They had done it. Earth now possessed a power that could rival any force in the galaxy. They had the means to defend themselves, to strike back, and to show the Galactic Council that their reign was not as invincible as they had believed. The weapon was ready, but the question remained, would the Galactic Council even notice? Would they realize the threat in time? Or would they continue to dismiss Earth as a minor player in the grand scheme of the galaxy? The stage was set, and the quiet hum of the weapon's power was a sign that change was coming. Earth's moment had arrived, and the Council would soon find out just how dangerous a planet they had ignored for so long. The Galactic Council had always prided itself on its ability to predict and control the flow of events across the galaxy. They believed that no force could rival their control, no power could stand against their vast empire. But in their arrogance, they had failed to account for one thing: Earth. The secret weapon that had been quietly developed on the distant planet was about to reveal itself in a way the Council could never have anticipated. It began subtly, almost like a whisper. The Council's intelligence networks had picked up unusual signals coming from Earth. At first, they dismissed them as nothing more than noise, distractions from a planet that had never been a serious threat. But soon, those signals began to grow stronger, more distinct. Something was happening on Earth, something they couldn't ignore. Yet the Council still refused to believe it could be anything of real importance. After all, how could a single planet, one so small and seemingly insignificant, pose any real danger to their carefully constructed empire? The first true indication that Earth was no longer the weak, unnoticed world it had once been came when the Galactic Council received a distress signal from one of their outer colonies. Ships that had been patrolling the fringes of Council space suddenly reported strange disruptions in their systems. Their sensors went dark, communication channels scrambled, and their once reliable technologies began to fail. The reports came in one after another, growing more desperate with each transmission. They were trying to understand what had happened, but no one could explain it. There were no signs of an attack, no visible enemy fleets, just an overwhelming wave of interference that had shut down everything they relied on. As the reports piled up, the Council finally took notice. They assumed this was the work of some unknown force, maybe a rogue faction or a rebellious group, but nothing prepared them for the truth. The disruptions were being caused by something far more powerful, something that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Earth's secret weapon had been activated. It was not just a device, but an entire system, one that could send waves of interference across vast distances, disabling the Council's advanced technologies and leaving them helpless. The Council's response was immediate. They couldn't afford to ignore the growing threat any longer. High-ranking officials gathered in emergency meetings, discussing what had happened and how to stop it. But despite their vast knowledge and resources, they couldn't come up with a solution. They had never faced anything like this before. They had never encountered a force that could undermine their superiority in such a quiet, calculated way. They were used to brute force, to overwhelming power that could crush any enemy in an instant. But this was different. Earth's weapon wasn't a force of destruction. It was a force of disruption, a force that dismantled their carefully structured systems piece by piece, without ever firing a single shot. The Galactic Council, in their haste to respond, ordered a fleet of ships to head toward Earth. They believed that by attacking the planet directly, they could eliminate the source of the disturbances and restore order to the galaxy. However, even as they mobilized, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. They had underestimated Earth for so long, and now they were beginning to realize the gravity of their mistake. They didn't know what Earth had created, but they knew it was something powerful enough to make even their most advanced technologies useless. As the fleet drew closer to Earth, something unexpected happened. The closer they got, the more the disruptions intensified. The fleet's systems began to fail, one by one. Their navigation, communication, and defense systems were all crippled by the same wave of interference that had struck their outer colonies. The Council's fleet, once a symbol of their overwhelming power, was now helpless in the face of this unknown force. They had no choice but to pull back, retreating in disarray, uncertain of what had just happened. Meanwhile, on Earth, the team of scientists and strategists who had developed the weapon were watching the events unfold. They had known this moment would come, the moment when Earth's power would be tested. They had designed the weapon not just to defend their planet, but to prove that they were no longer the helpless world that the Council had so often dismissed. The weapon's activation wasn't just a sign of Earth's strength. It was a message to the entire galaxy. Earth was no longer a planet to be ignored. As the Council's fleet retreated, they were left with no answers, only confusion and fear. They couldn't understand how Earth had developed such a powerful weapon, nor could they fathom how it had been hidden from their eyes for so long. Their belief in their own superiority had blinded them to the possibility that a seemingly insignificant planet could turn the tide against them. Now they were forced to confront the reality that Earth was not only capable of defending itself, but had the power to disrupt the very systems that held their empire together. The Council, once so confident in their ability to control the galaxy, was beginning to realize that they had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated Earth, and that mistake would cost them dearly. As they scrambled to understand the full extent of Earth's power, they couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of the end for the Galactic Council's reign? And if Earth could do this, what else were they capable of? As the Galactic Council regrouped, their confidence began to waver. The once unstoppable force they had built over centuries was now crumbling under the weight of an unseen enemy. The disruptions from Earth's mysterious weapon were growing stronger, and the Council's leaders were faced with a chilling reality. They no longer controlled the situation. They had underestimated Earth for so long that they didn't even know how to fight back. Every move they made seemed to be thwarted by the very systems they had relied on to maintain their power. The Council's experts were working around the clock, trying to understand the nature of the weapon that had begun to dismantle their fleets and systems. They analyzed every piece of data they had gathered, trying to decipher the source of the interference, but nothing made sense. Earth's technology was primitive in their eyes, yet it was now challenging the most advanced systems in the galaxy. How could something so simple be so powerful? The truth was, the weapon wasn't just a physical device. It was more than that. It was a combination of science, strategy, and something far deeper. Earth's scientists had tapped into energy sources and principles that had been lost to time, knowledge that had once been part of an ancient civilization's understanding of the universe. The weapon was a result of that forgotten knowledge, a force that could not simply be countered with brute technological power. It was about manipulating the very forces that held everything together: energy, communication, and even the way the galaxy itself was structured. While the Council scrambled to find answers, Earth's leaders knew they had to act quickly. They had proven that they could disrupt the Galactic Council's operations, but they couldn't stop there. The world had come together to create this weapon, and now they had to use it wisely. Their goal was not just to defend themselves, but to send a message to the galaxy that Earth would no longer be subjugated. They wanted the Council to know that their days of dominance were numbered, and that Earth would stand tall among the stars. As the days passed, Earth's weapon continued to grow in strength. It wasn't just about disabling the Council's fleets anymore. It was about slowly unraveling the systems that held the entire galaxy together. The weapon's power surged, creating massive waves of disruption that spread through the galactic network, affecting communication, transportation, and even the energy supply across many sectors. The Galactic Council's grip on the galaxy was slipping, and they had no idea how to regain control. On Earth, the atmosphere was one of tense anticipation. The scientists who had created the weapon were watching with bated breath, knowing that the next steps were crucial. They had accomplished the impossible, but they also knew that the real battle was just beginning. The Council would not take this challenge lying down. They had been humiliated, and their pride would drive them to take drastic measures. But the people of Earth had something the Council didn't: unity. For so long, Earth had been divided by politics, by war, by differences in culture and ideology. But now, in the face of this unprecedented threat, humanity had come together. Every nation, every community, had united in a common cause: to protect their world, their home. And in that unity, they had found strength that the Galactic Council could never understand. As the Council leaders sat in their high-tech chambers, their minds raced with possibilities. They had to find a way to stop Earth's weapon. But how? They couldn't simply send more ships. They already knew that their fleets were no match for what Earth had created. They couldn't invade the planet, either. Earth had made it clear that it would not be a passive target. So the Council was left with a single difficult option: negotiation. They had never considered negotiating with Earth. To them, it was a planet too small, too insignificant to be worthy of their time. But now, in the face of this crisis, they realized they had no choice. They needed to find a way to bring Earth to the table, to persuade its leaders to stand down. But that was easier said than done. The people of Earth had tasted power, tasted the freedom that came with standing up to the Galactic Council, and they would not give it up easily. The Council sent out emissaries, their most skilled diplomats, to initiate talks. But as they approached Earth, they found that the planet had changed. It was no longer the quiet, ignored world it had once been. The message from Earth was clear: if the Council wanted peace, they would have to earn it. There would be no more threats, no more domination. Earth's leaders were determined to secure a future where their planet could stand on its own terms, freed from the shadow of the Council. The emissaries arrived on Earth with the hope of negotiating a peaceful resolution, but they were met with resistance. The people of Earth had no intention of submitting to the will of the Galactic Council ever again. They had fought for their independence, they had fought for their survival, and now they were ready to fight for their future. Earth's leaders had made it clear that they would not back down, and the Council would have to prove they were willing to respect Earth's newfound strength. The stage was set. The Galactic Council, once the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy, now faced an Earth that had discovered its own power. The future of the galaxy was at a crossroads, and the next moves would determine whether the Council could regain control, or whether Earth would stand as a beacon of hope for those who had long been oppressed. The Galactic Council was now at a crossroads, their once impervious authority hanging by a thread. The emissaries they had sent to Earth, tasked with initiating peaceful negotiations, had returned with unsettling news. Earth's leaders were resolute, steadfast in their commitment to remain independent. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long, and now that the planet had discovered its true strength, they had no intention of allowing themselves to be controlled by the Council again. The emissaries described Earth as a world transformed. The people were no longer fearful or divided, but united in a common cause. Every region, every culture, had come together with a single purpose: to defend their planet and their sovereignty. It was a unity the Council had never expected, one that was more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. The idea that Earth would simply return to its position as a small, insignificant world under the control of the Council was no longer an option. The idea that the Council could return to their old ways of manipulation was becoming increasingly unrealistic. Back on the Council's capital world, leaders and diplomats debated fiercely. The idea of Earth's sudden rise to prominence, of this once dominant force shaking their foundations, was difficult to accept. They had long maintained that no species, not even one as industrious as humanity, could challenge the balance of power they had carefully constructed over millennia. But now, in the face of humanity's technological advancements and unity, that belief was shattered. The Council was forced to confront the reality that Earth had become a powerful force in the galaxy. It was not just their advanced weaponry that had made them formidable, but their ingenuity, their ability to adapt and overcome. The weapon they had developed was merely a symbol of humanity's potential, a testament to what could be achieved when a planet united for a common cause. The diplomats, frustrated by their inability to sway Earth's leadership, returned to their superiors with little more than the realization that direct confrontation would no longer be the answer. Earth had proven it would not back down, and it had shown that it was capable of defending itself. The Galactic Council could no longer rely solely on their fleets or technology to maintain their power. They had to change their approach to find a new way to coexist with Earth, or risk further destabilizing the galaxy. Meanwhile, on Earth, leaders began to prepare for the next phase of their plan. While the Council's emissaries had been given the opportunity to negotiate, Earth's leaders knew the real work was still ahead. They couldn't afford to be complacent. This was their moment to define their future, not just for their planet, but for all of humanity. Earth had earned the right to stand as an equal in the galaxy, and it would do so on its own terms. Humanity had always faced challenges, whether from within or beyond their planet. But this time, the challenge was different. This time, they were not fighting to survive. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. They had already shown they could disrupt the Council's power, but now they had to prove that their path forward would be one of diplomacy and cooperation, not conflict. Earth's leaders knew that strength without unity was hollow, and so they worked tirelessly to build alliances with other planets, even with those who had once been pawns of the Council. It was becoming clear that the galaxy was changing. As word spread of Earth's rise and its refusal to be subjugated, other planets began to reassess their own positions. Many had long been under the thumb of the Council, forced to accept their dominance out of fear or necessity. But Earth's defiance was sparking something in the galaxy, a movement, a desire for freedom and self-determination that was slowly growing in the shadows. The Galactic Council's tight grip on power was loosening, not just because of Earth's actions, but because of the idea that their reign no longer had to be accepted as inevitable. As Earth's alliances grew, so too did its influence. The planet's leaders began reaching out to distant colonies and other worlds that had been marginalized by the Council. These planets, many of whom had suffered under the Council's oppressive rule, began to listen to Earth's message. The idea of unity, of standing together as equals, was beginning to take hold across the stars. Earth was not alone in its struggle. It was now the rallying point for all those who sought a better future, a future where they had control over their own destiny. The Council, realizing the shift in momentum, began to make their own moves. They tried to offer concessions, attempting to convince Earth's leadership that peace was still achievable, that cooperation was still possible. But Earth's leaders, confident in their newfound strength and unity, were no longer willing to entertain the idea of returning to the old ways. The era of dominance was over. They would negotiate, but only on equal terms. No longer would they be the ones to concede or compromise. Earth would stand as a power in its own right, and the Council would have to accept that. As the galactic stage began to shift, Earth's message spread far and wide. It wasn't about defeating the Galactic Council. It was about creating a new balance of power, where every planet had the freedom to thrive without fear of domination. Earth had changed the game, and in doing so, it had become a symbol of hope for countless other worlds. But the Council was not done. They had spent centuries building their empire, and they were not about to let it crumble without a fight. Though the tides had turned, the struggle was far from over. Earth's challenge had sparked a new era, but whether that era would be defined by peace or conflict remained to be seen. As the balance of power in the galaxy shifted, the Galactic Council found itself at a crossroads. They had spent centuries building their empire, relying on strength, control, and manipulation to maintain order across countless worlds. But now, their power was being questioned by a single planet, Earth. The Council's once invincible status had been shaken, and they had to face a truth they could no longer deny. The galaxy was changing. Earth's rise had been swift and unprecedented. The planet had moved from being a small, largely unnoticed world to a symbol of resilience and hope for those who had long been oppressed by the Council's rule. As Earth's influence spread, So did the hope that perhaps the galaxy could be different, free from the Council's iron grip. But the Council, though rattled, was far from defeated. They were determined to retain their power and control over the galaxy, and they began to explore new ways to counter Earth's growing strength. At the same time, Earth's leaders were not naively optimistic. They knew that their journey was just beginning. The challenges they had already faced, while monumental, were only the first steps in securing a new future for their planet and others. The weapon they had created, the disruption of the Council's systems, had demonstrated that Earth was no longer weak, but it had also made them a target. The Council, though hesitant, would undoubtedly look for new ways to undermine Earth's newfound power. Earth had to be vigilant. It had to continue building alliances, and it had to stay united if it was to maintain its hard-won freedom. One of the key aspects of Earth's strategy was diplomacy. Unlike the Council, who had relied on force, Earth understood that lasting peace couldn't be achieved through violence or coercion. They began reaching out to other planets, many of whom had suffered under the Council's oppressive rule, and began fostering a coalition, a united front of worlds that were tired of being controlled. Earth's leaders spoke of mutual respect, the freedom to choose one's own path, and the importance of cooperation rather than domination. Slowly, other planets began to listen. Among the first to join Earth's coalition were planets that had long been marginalized by the Council, worlds rich in resources and culture, but long held in servitude. These planets, seeing Earth's bold move as a chance to change their fate, began to quietly pledge their support. They provided resources, knowledge, and technology to aid Earth's efforts, strengthening the resistance against the Council's continuing influence. But as more planets joined the cause, the Council began to feel the weight of their crumbling empire. The Galactic Council, once an alliance of powerful races and civilizations, now found itself fracturing. Some members, particularly those who had benefited most from the Council's dominance, resisted Earth's call for equality. They feared losing their privileges, their place at the top of the galaxy's hierarchy. But even these dissenting factions could not deny the growing tide of change. They had no choice but to reconsider their positions, especially as the unity between Earth and the other rebellious worlds grew stronger. While the Council's political landscape became more unstable, Earth's leaders continued to strengthen their position. They were careful, strategic, and always focused on the long-term vision of a galaxy that valued equality and self-determination. They worked tirelessly to ensure that their message reached every corner of the galaxy, that no planet should have to submit to the will of a few powerful elites. Each new alliance solidified Earth's standing as a force for positive change. The Galactic Council, realizing that they could not simply crush this growing movement with force, began to shift their tactics. They attempted to negotiate, offering compromises and incentives to Earth's leadership. They suggested that Earth could join the Council as an equal member, with full representation and autonomy. They tried to paint this as a way forward, an opportunity for Earth to be part of the galactic community, where they could influence the direction of the galaxy. But Earth's leaders were not easily swayed. They had seen through the Council's tactics before, and they knew that even in their best offers, there were still strings attached. Joining the Council, as they had envisioned it, meant compromising Earth's independence. It meant accepting a system where they would have to answer to a higher authority, one that still maintained power over other worlds. That was not the future Earth's leaders had fought for. They wanted true equality, not subjugation dressed up as partnership. Instead, Earth held firm to its position. They rejected the Council's offer, but they did so with a calm resolve that sent a clear message. Earth would not bend to the will of the Council, no matter the cost. They would continue to fight for a future where every planet, every civilization, could stand on its own and thrive without the fear of being controlled. The message resonated beyond Earth. Other worlds, many of whom had been silent for so long, began to speak up. They shared Earth's vision, adding their voices to the chorus of those calling for an end to the Council's oppressive rule. As more planets joined the coalition, the Galactic Council's influence continued to weaken. Their power had been built on the oppression of others, and now that foundation was crumbling beneath them. The stage was set for the next phase. Earth, united with its allies, was preparing to face the Galactic Council head-on, not with force, but with the undeniable power of unity and conviction. The fight for the future of the galaxy was no longer about violence or warfare. It was about standing together for what was right. Earth had become the beacon of hope, showing the galaxy that no matter how powerful a few might be, they could never extinguish the collective will of the many. The Council had underestimated Earth, and now they were facing the consequences of that mistake. Their empire, built on fear and dominance, was beginning to unravel. And as Earth stood firm in its commitment to change, it became clear that the galaxy was on the brink of a new era, one where unity, equality, and the freedom to choose one's own destiny would define the future.